It started with a photograph that should not have existed. Daniel wasn't looking for anything unusual that morning. He had spent years digging through forgotten antique shops, flea markets, and estate sales, chasing pieces of history that everyone else ignored. Old cameras were his specialty, not because they were valuable, but because they remembered things. Every scratch, every worn edge told a story about hands that once held them, moments that once mattered. The shop was small and suffocating, tucked between a closed bookstore and a boarded-up cafe. Dust hung in the air like it had nowhere else to go. Most people would have walked past it without noticing. Daniel almost did. Until he saw the lens. It was sitting alone in a glass case. No camera body, just the lens. It looked older than it should have been. Heavy, solid. The metal was dark and worn, with faint engravings along the rim that Daniel couldn't quite read. It didn't reflect light normally. It absorbed it. The shop owner barely looked up when Daniel asked about it. "Found it in a storage unit," he said. "No camera matched it. No brand I recognize." Daniel bought it for $20. That night, he attached it to his digital camera using an old adapter ring. It barely fit, like it wasn't meant to belong to anything modern. But eventually, it locked into place with a soft, final click. He raised the camera and aimed it toward his apartment window. The street outside was empty, quiet, still. He pressed the shutter. The camera made a dull, unfamiliar sound. When he looked at the screen, his stomach tightened. There was a man standing on the sidewalk. Daniel lowered the camera and looked outside. The street was empty. He raised the camera again. The man was still there in the photograph, standing under the street lamp, facing directly toward Daniel's building. Daniel stepped closer to the window, his heart beginning to race. He scanned the sidewalk, the shadows, every corner. Nothing. He looked back at the photo. The man hadn't moved. 10 seconds passed, then 20. And then, from the far end of the street, a figure emerged from the darkness, walking slowly, step by step, until he stopped under the street lamp, exactly where he had been standing in the photo. Exactly how he had been standing. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. The lens hadn't captured the present, it had captured the future. At first, Daniel told himself it was coincidence, a trick of timing, a mistake. So he tested it again. He aimed the camera at his kitchen, took a photo. The image showed his coffee mug shattered on the floor. He frowned and lowered the camera. The mug sat safely on the counter, untouched. He waited. 30 seconds later, his elbow brushed the mug by accident. It fell. It shattered. Exactly as the photo had shown. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Over the next few days, he experimented constantly. Every photo showed moments that hadn't happened yet. Seconds into the future, sometimes minutes. Never hours, never days. Just enough to see what was coming, just enough to change it. At first, it felt like a gift. He avoided small accidents, spilled drinks, missed calls, forgotten items. Life became smoother, easier, predictable. He began to rely on it, trust it, until the night it showed him something it never had before, something he couldn't ignore. Daniel aimed the camera out his apartment window again, out of habit more than anything else. He pressed the shutter. When the image appeared, his hands went cold. There was smoke. Thick, dark smoke pouring out of a building across the street. His building. Flames burned behind the windows. The image shook slightly in his hands. He lowered the camera and looked outside. Everything was normal, quiet, safe. He looked back at the photo. The fire was still there. His chest tightened. If the lens was right, then sometime soon his building would burn, and he was inside it. Daniel grabbed his keys immediately. He didn't hesitate. He trusted the lens now more than he trusted reality. He ran down the stairs, out onto the street, and put as much distance between himself and the building as possible. He waited. Minutes passed, nothing happened. No smoke, no fire, no screams. People walked by normally, unaware of anything unusual. Daniel began to wonder if this time was different, if this time the future had changed. And then he smelled it. Smoke. He turned. It wasn't coming from his building. It was coming from the apartment next door, a small kitchen fire already spreading. People began shouting. Someone pulled a fire alarm. Sirens echoed in the distance. Daniel stared in disbelief. The fire wasn't his building, it was next door. He had misinterpreted the image. But as he watched the flames grow, a sickening realization formed in his mind. If he had stayed inside, he might have noticed sooner. He might have warned someone. He might have stopped it before it spread. Instead, he had run, because the lens told him to. That was the moment he began to question it. Weeks passed. Daniel used the lens less. He wasn't sure if it was helping him or controlling him. And then one night, he made a mistake. He aimed the camera at himself. He didn't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Fear. He pressed the shutter. The photograph appeared. Daniel was lying on the floor. His eyes open. Unmoving. Dead. The camera slipped from his hands. He stared at the image, unable to breathe. He was wearing the same clothes, standing in the same room. There was no visible injury, no sign of what had happened, just him. Still, lifeless. He looked up slowly. The room was silent. Nothing had changed, but now he knew something was coming, something he couldn't see, something the lens already had. He backed away from the spot where the photo showed his body. His heart pounded violently. Seconds passed. Nothing happened. He waited longer. Still nothing. Relief began to creep in. Maybe this time he could change it. Maybe this time he could escape it. And then he heard it. A sound behind him. A soft mechanical click. Daniel turned. The camera was on the floor. The lens was facing him. He didn't remember placing it like that. It shouldn't have been able to move, but it was pointed directly at him, watching him, waiting. Daniel felt a sudden crushing pressure in his chest. His breath caught. Pain spread down his arms. He stumbled. His legs gave out beneath him. As he collapsed, his eyes locked onto the lens, and in that final moment, he understood. The lens hadn't just been showing him the future, it had been guiding him toward it. Every choice he made, every step he took, every moment he tried to avoid, it had all led here. His vision faded. The last thing he saw was the camera. Still watching. Still waiting. Ready for the next photograph.